Here we go. All right. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Uprise MMA Live. And I am, of course, superfan Huzefa, just kind of here to ask questions and ask questions that maybe you guys want to know. And then, of course, we're joined by Pete Panos, the owner and founder of Uprise MMA, a awesome MMA gym here in Los Angeles. So today we've got the sickest, we're one of the sickest, I think it is the sickest non-pay-per-view event fight that I've ever heard of or ever seen. And we are here to talk about two super huge, super interesting fights today. So, Pete, how's it going with you?
I'm good. I'm super excited about this card on Saturday.
I know. I'm freaking out. I can't wait. I've been watching all the interviews. So without further ado, we're going to start with Woodley versus Covington. I have a lot I want to ask about. So, of course, if you guys are new to the show and haven't seen it before, it's sort of like the format is Pete is the expert. He's been a practitioner of mixed martial arts for, is it 30 years? How long?
I've been doing martial arts a long time.
A long
30
time.
years.
And of course, actually, Pete's my coach. He's been training me for the last year, primarily in Muay Thai, which has been a blast. I love the sport, both now training and also, of course, I'm a super big fan of watching the UFC and watching MMA. So here we go. We got the timer. We're going to do a 5-minute limit on Woodley versus Covington. So here we go. And now the first thing I want to ask about, of course, we always get into the style matchups, and that's what Pete knows best. But before even talking about the style matchups, I got to say, I've heard so many reporters talking about the two-fight losing streak and the fact that Woodley hasn't won any rounds in the last 10 rounds, and how that's going to be so difficult to overcome. But I actually looked this up today, and I want to get your thoughts from a psychology standpoint of a fighter. I saw Justin Gaethje had 2 losses in a row, came back, and now he's fighting for a title. We've had, of course, Jorge Masvidal came off 2 losses, and then his career just skyrocketed. And Henry Cejudo came off 2 losses in a row and then eventually won a championship. I mean, what are your thoughts? How real is that concern? Or for somebody at Woodley's level who's been a former champion and dominated the welterweight division, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a concern, I think, because Woodley started off like a bat out of hell. He came out, he was very dominant, and then he started, like maybe it's father time, I'm not sure, but he started to dip off, and he's lost his last 2 fights. Unlike some of the other fighters you mentioned who had a couple losing streaks and then went on to championship fights and championship caliber fights. It's kind of the opposite for Woodley. He was a champion, then he started losing his fights, and now everybody's asking, can he come back? And I think it's the way his last 2 fights went. He just, he didn't look like the Tyron Woodley that we're used to seeing. He didn't open up his hands. He didn't pull the trigger. He was kind of hesitant. And for Woodley to be effective, he's got to let his hands go. He's got to engage. He's got to be ready to fight. And we didn't see that the last 2 fights. So I think that's why people have a little bit of concern. Is it just past prime? They lose interest? But I'll say this, I do think he's motivated for this fight.
Fair enough. Yeah, I definitely do too. I love seeing all the interviews he's done. I know Covington has barely done any interviews. He did a talk today a little bit, but Woodley, to me, from that standpoint, he just sounds good. He sounds like he's in the right place. So I like both fighters a lot, and I'm not super partial, but Woodley just sounds good. Okay, so let's talk about the style matchups. A lot of folks I've been hearing most of the predictions people are favoring Covington and his style. Yeah. What are your thoughts and why?
I'm not going to get into making a prediction or anything or who I favor, but I can tell you the strengths. And Woodley's a better striker. I think Colby is the better wrestler, even though Woodley is a Division I wrestler as well. I just think the style that you're going to get from Covington is going to be, nonstop pressure. He's going to be on you, and he's going to push the pace, going to try to wrestle you to the ground, press you against the cage, and just keep that pressure and get to a position where Woodley can't let his hands go, even if he wants to let them go. So stylistically, that's what makes it interesting. And I'm really curious to see how Tyron does when they do start wrestling. How's his gas tank? Is he going to be able to go, later into the later rounds and still be able to maintain a steady pace?
So what would your strategy be for somebody like Tyron in order to be victorious?
I think he needs to come out the gate. I don't think he needs to look at it. I think he needs to make it a short fight. I think he needs to look at this is a 2-round fight, a 3-round fight instead of a 5-round fight. I think he needs to try to get in there and try to finish this sooner than later. I think if the fight progresses into the third, fourth, fifth round, it favors Covington strongly.
And do you see Covington leveraging his wrestling ground
Yes.
game?
Yeah. He's going to do what he does, and he does it really well. He's one of the best guys in the UFC when it comes to pressure and constant moving forward and smothering.
The fact that this fight is highly anticipated, there has been some back and forth, although Woodley even acknowledged today that a lot of that he thinks is just fabricated, so it's not really getting to him. But let's say it is a bit of a pressure cooker. Who do you think that favors?
Pressure cooker, and what do you mean? In what way?
In terms of the fact that there's so many eyes on it, everybody's been talking about it.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of hype.
I don't know. I think it maybe favors Woodley because I think because of the fact his last two fights he looked like he didn't have the motivation, or he didn't look like his old self. So maybe all this hype and maybe all this hoopla gets him going. He's going to have to if he's going to be Covington. He's definitely going to have to bring his A game for sure. But yeah, I'm super excited. I think it seems like, look, I know the media pushes the hype and that's what sells fights, but it does seem like there's a genuine dislike between the two fighters. So that's going to make it, even more interesting.
It definitely does. And we're right out at the timer. Here we go. And now we are jumping to my favorite thing. This is what I want to talk about both fights, but Khamzat Chimaev versus Gerald Meerschaert. So for those of you guys who don't know Chimaev, but you probably do if you watch mixed martial arts, he's come into the UFC like a bat out of hell, and he's just everybody's talking to him. The Wolf is his nickname. What do you think about this fight? We got kind of a veteran versus this guy who's an up-and-comer who had two fights back-to-back within 10 days and just dominated in both. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, look, Chimaev, he looked good in his two fights, but the guys he fought probably aren't the level of fighters he's going to be facing going forward. So if you're going to ask me this question again in 6 months, I'll probably have a different answer when I see the caliber of fighters increase. But look, you fight who's in front of you, and that's who was in front of him, and he did exactly what he was supposed to do, and he did it extremely well. Meerschaert's no joke though. This guy's has a lot of fights under his belt. He's got a lot of submissions. I don't think he's gonna, and I think he's highly motivated. I think he's offended by the fact that, he's been double booked, Chimaev, and I think that offends him. I think he feels like he's being looked over, and so he's got motivation. Now the question is, can he steal that hype? Can he take the hype of Khamzat and turn it into something that works for him? That's going to be the big question I'm looking at.
So for Chimaev, it was interesting today in the press conference. The thing about him, in addition to his skill, he seems so confident. What do you think from a psychological standpoint? I mean, he's just, I've even more so and Khabib is a very confident fighter, but I've never really seen that early on, like with a seasoned vet like that and somebody who has those two fights, which you say basically are saying that the fighters he fought didn't have that same pedigree, that same experience. How do you think that's going to play in? Could it backfire in your thoughts from training fighters and being in their corner? How do you see that going?
Well, it could backfire only because he's such a new fighter and he's already developed such a love-hate relationship with the fans. People already want to see him lose because they think he's cocky, overly confident. And then obviously people love it because, this is a guy who's backed it up so far. And they want to see if he can back it up again and again and again. I saw the presser too. I saw the press conference today, and he's definitely cocky. He's definitely confident, and Dana White's loving it. I'm telling you, he's looking at this as a golden goose, and I know he's gonna be holding his breath, hoping that he gets through this fight easily, and then moves on to the next fight with Damian Maia.
What about that? Let's preview that just a touch. Not again, don't want to make the same mistake that Dana White's making in terms of overlooking, I suppose, Meerschaert. But let's say he does go through Meerschaert. What I mean, how do you see something like that going? Damian Maia is just such a legend in the game.
Yeah. He's a legend in the game. I think Damian Maia is a little past his prime. However, look, Chimaev was questioning the Meerschaert's level of jiu-jitsu. Is he really a black belt? He should give me the black belt. There'll be no questioning Damian Maia's jiu-jitsu. I mean, we know from his track record, this guy is one of the best on the ground. So, if he gets through this fight, which I think he will, because I do think Meerschaert's kind of a good fight for him. I don't think it's gonna be an easy fight, but I do think it's a good fight for him. He likes to grapple. He likes to get to the ground, and that's where Chimaev is very strong. There's ground and pound and there's pressure. So I think it's a good fight for him. I think it's a tough fight because I think Meerschaert's going to be motivated. But if he gets past this, I think the Damian Maia fight will pose different problems just because the level of jiu-jitsu will go up even more.
So from the first two fights, and there's so much hype, and I know you said maybe the level of competition is going to be increased, but from your perspective, hype is worth it. Do you think that it makes sense, the amount of attention he's getting?
It's hard to say. I think it's, everybody's making the hype out of the fact that he fought so quickly after his first fight. But that, he's a young kid. I think he's 26. He didn't sustain any damage in that first fight or the second fight. So I think there's a lot of fighters at the UFC that could probably turn around and fight again if they had that easy. I don't remember what the number was, but it was like 100 and something punches thrown to like 2 punches thrown. So, I'm not on the hype train yet. I want to see a couple more fights. I really do.
Fair enough. Yeah. And of course that's the area you know best. I do tend to get on the hype train. I've got to admit
It's fun.
Fights, it's so fun. His fights were so exciting. And I think that combination with it, I mean, I love the confidence. I don't care. But I rarely do ever become on that hater side of the fence, but he's just so exciting and so fun. And he's just so matter of fact about the way he talks. So he's on the level of entertainment in terms of his press conferences as like Conor McGregor or somebody like that, in my opinion. So I can't wait. Maybe
I don't go that far yet, but I will say this: he does look like he's having fun, and he's extremely confident right now. And look, as a fan of, I'm a coach, but I'm also a fan of the sport, and it is entertaining when you have young fighters like that just want to, like he says, smash everybody. Because it makes you like, okay, let's see if this guy can actually do what he's saying. He's sitting right next to Don Cerrone, telling him that basically fight him too.
Right.
You gotta love it. You gotta love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, well, that is it. That is the end of our time today. So we got through Covington and Woodley, Chimaev and Meerschaert, and even talked a little bit about the Damian Maia fight, which is pretty sweet. That's it for this week's show, and we're going to be touching back next week, even going to be talking again about these fights that are up this Saturday, and then, of course, previewing that next UFC big card with Adesanya and Paul Costa. So that's going to be exciting. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we will see you next time. Take it easy.
Yes.